welcome to everybody. So we're going to be talking about America Amplified Election 2024. We are asking a lot of your time. I know 2 hours is huge, but it's actually deliberate. It's intentional to get you to step back from the daily news grind, take some time, have some fun. This training is designed to be fun and interactive. We want to hear from you. Raise your hand, chime up. We want you to be thinking differently, okay? And especially how it comes to engagement and how it comes to covering politics. This is a critical time for local news. I mean, you can't read the newspapers, not that anybody reads the newspapers, or follow along online with what is going on with politics and news without knowing that local news is in a crisis. It is a critical time, obviously, for public media to really establish themselves as a trusted news source in all of our communities. And that is really the underlying goal of the initiative, to help you do that, to give you some of the tools and strategies that you need to really establish yourself as that critical news source. So let's talk a little bit about the agenda for today. We're going to be talking about a little bit about America Amplified. We're going to talk about the entire program, the timeline of the training that we're going through. I do want to mention one thing. We've been sending out registration links for the training, and we had a training scheduled for next week. We've decided to push that off. We want to give you a little bit more time to kind of ingest this first foundational session, and hopefully time to talk to your individual America Amplified coach over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Our second session is going to be October 25th. We'll send out emails to let you know about that. So I'm going to kind of go over some of that and introduce you to your trainers and your coaches, and then hand it off to Jen Brandel, who will be doing some fantastic work with really understanding why change is necessary, where public media fits in all this, and why engagement is kind of a crucial strategy at this point in our time as a news industry. We'll go over some America Amplified case studies on engagement, and then we'll give you a little bit of homework. We asked you to stay on one computer if possible, because you guys will be brainstorming, you'll be Jamboarding, you'll be talking to each other. And we know, and you know, that when you're in person, it's a lot more powerful of a collaboration. So a little bit more housekeeping. We invite you to be on camera whenever you can, especially during the breakout rooms. 2 hours, take care of yourself. If you need to get something to eat, if you need to get something to drink, if you need a bio break, do whatever you need to do to make yourself comfortable. We do welcome your questions. You throw them in the chat, raise a hand. We want this, as I said, to be kind of interactive and fun. All right, a little bit of background on America Amplified. We've been around since 2019. Many of you have actually been with us on this entire journey. Many of you are new. We are, whoops, I'm hearing what Mark Simpson says. We are supported, of course, by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, who have had a long-standing commitment to the concept and practice of community-engaged journalism. Our mission, this is what community-engaged journalism is, but we kind of put it differently. We want to empower public media journalists with the skills and resources needed to put listening to their communities at the center of the reporting process. We seek to inspire public media news organizations to better reflect America, build trust, and uphold principles of democracy. I've been a journalist for quite a long time, and generally the way it has been practiced traditionally is we go into a community with a story in mind. Community engaged journalism flips that on its head. You go into the community and let them tell you what the story should be. Anyway, let's go back to the midterms. In the last iteration of America Amplified, we were working with 20 stations across the country and helping them do more community engaged journalism. But in the middle of 2022, we thought there was a fabulous opportunity to really, once again, put public media at the center of the conversation about trust in media. So we launched the midterm elections project. We worked with 25 states and 30 newsrooms in 25 states. And we basically started with a tool, and the tool was Hearken. We used a Hearken embed, which basically is a question prompt. And the question prompt was, what questions do you have about participating in the upcoming midterm elections? We fielded about 600 questions from across the country during that time. You know, the goal was to ensure that our communities had the crucial information they needed in order to participate in the midterms. And that's what we did. This was a pilot project for what we're doing now in election 2024. The same mission: meet the information needs through answering questions and engagement. Ensure that our communities have the information they need to confidently participate in the 2024 elections. All right, so that's where we're at, and that's what we're going to do. What have you signed up for? Very simply speaking, it's kind of two different tracks that are related and wound up within each other. One is soliciting questions, as I said, with the Hearken prompt, which you can use on many different levels in many different ways. And number two, engaging with a community or part of a community that you haven't served well in the past. So this is the timeline of our project. We'll be doing some training in the fall, coaching and support. We will launch the Hearken embed in January. We will evaluate it kind of halfway through the year and see where we're at, and then relaunch it with a second prompt towards the end of the year. Very specifically, what questions do you have about participating in the upcoming election? We will be dividing you guys, all of you, there's 60 some newsrooms. We will divide you into cohorts, into smaller groups. And those groups will be based on, it may be the size of your newsroom, it may be the experience you're bringing to this in terms of engagement, it may be the community that you want to engage with. We'll be dividing you into smaller groups, working with a coach. And these cohorts, what we've learned over the years when we've been doing this, these cohorts are all about learning from each other. I mean, we all know that in public media, we tend to work in silos and we reinvent the wheel over and over again. This is a way to try to overcome that and learn from each other. All right, so that's the overview of the entire program. Very quickly, this training series, this is to give you the tools that allow you to engage with new communities. The timeline for the training, we're starting today, why engaged elections. We'll talk about engagement, we'll talk about why it's needed and where public media falls into that. The next two sessions, we'll talk about identifying a community that you want to reach and learning about that community, understanding that community, and then figuring out strategies to really engage and build trust in that community. And then some metrics to measure this and to gauge the success of what we're doing. In the end, we would love you to have kind of an outline of your project at the end of the training, not the end of this whole year, but the end of the training, an outline of your project with some clearly identified goals and milestones, either as a ready to pitch deck or a one sheet that you want to share with your entire newsroom so that you can get buy-in to this project. There will be some limited homework after each of these training sessions. You don't have to do it, right? But we strongly encourage you to take an hour or two with your colleague from your station to talk about the homework. The more you put in, the more you get out. You can also work with it with your America Amplified coach or trainer. Very quickly, let me introduce your coaches here. I'm Elisa. I live in San Diego. Fun fact, I was so excited about this initiative. I got 2 new hips in preparation in August so that I can run as quickly as possible. That sounds crazy, but it's actually true. Chelsea Naughton, please tell us where you're from and what you do and a fun fact.
Yeah, hello everyone. I am Chelsea Naughton. I'm the
Scott, we're good in here now.
Manager for America Amplified, and that means that I do all the things on our website and social, but also because we're a small team, I'm also running these trainings with you and coaching on community engagement best practices. That was more information than you needed about that. But I live in Brevard, North Carolina, and I made it to nationals as a gymnast when I was 14, or I think. So, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Paola Marizan, please introduce yourself.
Hola, buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everyone. So glad to see you all here. My name is Paola Marison, and I am one of your engagement trainers. So I'll be working with you closely throughout the project just to make sure that you meet the goals that you set at the beginning. And I am right now in Evansville, Indiana, but I am originally from the Dominican Republic. And a fun fact is that I do boxing with my 5-year-old and his dad. So we're kind of like a boxing family. So yeah, so nice to see you guys here.
Abby.
Hello, I'm Abby McCafferty. I am the new project manager for America Amplified. I am currently in Indianapolis. A random fun fact for me is that I share my birthday with Beyonce. Yeah.
JMR.
Hey everyone, I'm Jessica Maria Ross, aka JMR. I am zooming in from the lovely university town of Davis, California, unceded Patwin land. I am one of your coaches and allies in this process, which is like my happy place. So I'm excited. Fun fact, I thought of this morning. Little known that in high school, I was voted most liberated woman for my high school yearbook. Gives you a sense of what I was like in high school.
Nice. And Jen Brandel.
Hello there, I'm Jen Brandel from Chicago, unceded Potawatomi land. Fun fact, I have a cold and it's hard for me to talk. So I'll do my best during today's presentation. But yes, that's not a fun fact at all, but it's a fact. Over to you, Elisa.
Well, actually, we're turning it over to you at this point, Jen.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Any questions? Are there any questions? Should we just keep going? Or if there are questions, let us know. Anybody in the chat?
Yeah, feel free to throw them in the chat as we go. We can answer them or come off mute if you have any questions just about like the trajectory of the program, why we're here, etc. And if we're ready to go, we're going to jump right into content.
And
all right.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, please know, you guys know how to reach us on Slack. I know I went very quickly through all that, and we are very happy to have one-on-one discussions with you. And oh, you should know that our keyword throughout this entire year and a half is flexible. So whatever the question is, the answer is generally yes. Okay. Take it away, Jen.
Excellent. Well, I'm so excited to be with y'all today, despite my failing voice. Hopefully it'll keep up with me today. But I have met many of you before, but not everyone. I run a company called Hearken. I used to be a public media reporter at WBEZ. I started a series called Curious City, which is really public powered or community powered. You'll see there's many different names for this kind of work. But I started a company, Hearken, in order to help newsrooms operationalize engagement. Because a lot of times it was just like a one-off project or a little thing here and there. And we've learned so much over the years about what makes engagement projects work, either with serving your current audiences or communities that you want to serve. And I'm really excited to be along for this journey with you, partnering with America Amplified. So we've worked with hundreds of newsrooms around the world, public media in the US, as well as the BBC, the ABC, the NRK, the other public media outlets in Europe. And we found that this approach really works no matter where you are. Okay, we're gonna get right into it. I wanna see a show of hands or emoji, because I know we're in screen share mode, but if you wanna do an emoji or show of hands, how many of you were totally satisfied with your last election round coverage and just wouldn't change a thing? I'm gonna count on my coaches and others to look around, see if anyone's raising their hand. Is anyone totally satisfied? Going once? I'm seeing some good emojis in the chat here.
I am seeing 0 hands go up here. Oh, Carla, that is an ouchie emoji. Let's see some more.
We have the angry face.
Ooh.
So,
oh, the steam.
Yeah. Yes. All right. We thought this might be the case. So I want to share with you, like, honestly, what I feel like is the secret to life. Maybe I'll put this, this formula on my gravestone. But I learned this in a leadership program a few years ago about how change happens. So if you're dissatisfied with your coverage before, there is a world in which you can change it, but there's a specific formula for making it happen. And here it is. Change only happens when there is sufficient dissatisfaction with the status quo, when there is a vision about how things can be different than how they are now, and then when you have an actual practical plan to make it happen. If you don't have dissatisfaction, you're not going to be motivated to change. Like, it takes a lot of energy to change. So you need to be like not into what you were doing. And if you don't have a vision for how things can be different, you're going to just be stuck in this land of like, I don't like this, but I don't know what else I could do. I don't know what other options there are. And then if you have dissatisfaction and a vision for how you want the future to be, but you don't have the plan to get there, you're just going to be stuck in dreamer mode. So this program is really designed to help you maximize each of these 3 steps to help make change happen in your newsroom and help your elections coverage for this coming year that is, as Elisa said, like, could not be more critical to help you do the best job you possibly can for your communities, for the American public, for, dare I say, democracy. So what we're going to do in a moment is you're going to talk to someone about your answer to this question, but I want to give you 30 seconds or so to think about what frustrates you the most about elections coverage now. And this could be as someone who makes it or consumes it or both. There's no wrong answer, but we want to hear from you. What is your dissatisfaction? Because we're not going to know how to help you change if we don't know what it is you don't like right now. So if you have a sticky note, if you have a pen and paper in front of you, feel free to jot down what is coming to mind for you about elections coverage. Don't put it in the chat yet. We're actually going to do a little fun exercise in a sec, but just think about what frustrates you the most. I'm going to walk you through a tool that we're going to use throughout this program that some of you may not have used before. It's called Jamboard, and it's available on Google. Like if you're a Gmail client, you can get it. It's a free service. It's basically like a whiteboarding tool. And I'm going to walk you through how to do it first via like slides. And then we're going to send a link in the chat for you to be able to practice it yourself. So if one of my colleagues can get that link ready to share, once you pull it up, you're going to see this nice little blank page here. And you're going to have that question: as a news consumer, what frustrates you the most about political coverage? You're going to see on the left, there's this little thing that looks like a sticky note. That is the sticky note that you will click on. Once you click on that sticky note, in the middle of that toolbar, a prompt is going to pop up where you can type into it. They don't allow for like a novel, so you'll have to be somewhat short, a couple sentences at most. But click on that sticky note, write in what you're frustrated about, and then click save. And then that sticky note is going to be added to our wall of frustration here. So we are going to generate as much and as many different ideas for like what you're not into in terms of political or elections coverage as it stands now. And there's going to be another prompt there where if you have time, you can add who is doing a good job at this. Who do you want to emulate? Who do you think is doing it right? But that's only if you have time. Okay, so I'd love for my colleagues to throw in the Jamboard link right now. So click on the link that's now in the chat. I'm gonna click on it as well and just open it here and hopefully see all of you. Yay, we have our random anonymous ducks and chameleons jumping in. I want you to just take a second practice. So see on the left-hand side, there's a sticky note. You can change the color if you want. You can make it green. Hello, and just write whatever you'd like in there to give it a go. Make sure it works. So, okay, when the media says the Latino vote, great, excellent. We want to see stuff like that. So this is where you can add your stickies. And when you have sufficiently put your frustrations down, you can go to this next slide up here about who's doing stuff well and what's notable. But looks like folks are getting their stickies on. Anyone have questions about how to use this? No. Okay, great. Hit us up in the chat if you do. What we're about to do is we're gonna whisk you away to a Zoom room with another person or partner, and or partners, because you might be with a group that's got a few people on a computer. And we want you to talk about what frustrates you, and we want you to add as many stickies as possible. So if you're listening, add the sticky of the person who's talking, and let's fill up that board. We're gonna do this for just the next like 5 or so minutes. So you'll be whisked away shortly, and we look forward to seeing your frustrations.
Hey, Jen.
Yeah.
You want to just show folks where they can move to another board if it gets too busy on the the next slide. There you go. There you go.
Why don't I make another board that says more dissatisfaction? If we've covered that up, feel free to go to the next page, and then we'll do vision on the last slide of like, if you have any people that you think are doing a great job, you could put it on.
That way, if the first slide feels too big and people want to go to the next one, look at that. Woo!
All right. And we might be moving yours around to like group them a little bit while you talk. So if you see them moving, you'll know it's us. All right. We're going to go to breakout rooms. We'll see you back in a few minutes.
Hello.
Woo, there's a lot of dissatisfaction.
Yep. This Jamboard is maybe the most like sticky note layers deep that I've ever seen one. So we are fed up.
Yeah, we're gonna have to capture these like in another format, and because there's like 100.
Yeah. I did my best to pull out some of the themes that I was seeing, but like I said, there's so many that I definitely did not cover them all. But the themes that I was able to pull out, that national discourse is overshadowing local. We're not doing enough local, or we're not able to get the message out about local as politicians are dictating what we talk about too much. There was a bunch that were like, we're sick of that. And then just like the cultural buzz issue is getting too much play. And some people's was another one that like I said, I definitely did not catch them all. Anybody want to share out what they talked about in their room? You can raise your hand and we will pass the virtual mic to you. I know you're not satisfied, so what those things came up for you? Maya.
So our group talked a little bit about both like kind of clickbait stuff, but how national politics, yes, overshadows local. And a question came up is like, how do we get how do we get our listeners interested in these local races? And we were using the example here in South Carolina, we just had a state Senate race. And the guy who won in the runoff only beat the other guy by 11 votes. And so like, how do we get people more interested? Like, obviously we're interested in it, but how do we also get regular voters more interested in that kind of coverage as well?
That is such a good question.
Yeah, 11 votes, that's bonkers. Your vote matters. Cleveland idea stream, and then we'll take Georgia, and then we'll jump into our next part of the combo.
Okay. Hello, we were with Little Rock as well in our breakout session. We talked about, well, Stephanie mentioned that, we just don't have enough staff to cover everything that's going on with elections. Our station covers 22 counties in Northeast Ohio, so that's a huge chunk of the state. But we were talking to our peers at Little Rock, and they were saying, they've got a 3-person newsroom, and they're in the Capitol covering, the State House. So that from like a resources standpoint is challenging. We also talked about how because of that, it's difficult to have enough capacity to cover like smaller elections in communities throughout the region. Oftentimes you're very focused on like the statewide issues and candidates, and there just isn't enough capacity to cover some of the candidates in other places. I think that's what we talked about.
Thank you. That's great.
Josephine, Georgia.
So we talked about some of the things that we were dissatisfied with, but mostly we couldn't come up with anyone that was doing it well on a consistent basis. We mentioned news outlets that do it well every once in a while with specific stories, but we really couldn't think of a news outlet. And I'll just throw in one of the things that, you know, people are kind of all talking about the same stuff. We live in Georgia. It's particularly bad just based on our national profile at the moment. So,
yeah.
But
well, that actually transitions us really well to our next part, which is about being part of the solution. And so, yeah, obviously we are not thrilled with the way things are going. That's evident. One, because you chose to participate in this project, you see the need for it, but also by everything and more that we just talked about. But as public media, we like to think of ourselves as unique. We're the weird ones in the media landscape, but also we have a unique obligation to serve the entire public, which we haven't always done super well. And I want us to start thinking about what is unique about public media and why we as public media journalists and stations might have an advantage in serving Americans' election information needs. I would like to put into your brain as a food for thought some language from the Public Broadcasting Act of 1967. And I'll just go ahead and read it to you. It encourages the public broadcasting services, which will be responsive to the interests of the people throughout the United States, and that it is in the public interest to encourage programming that addresses the needs of unserved and underserved audiences. So with that in mind, what really does make us unique in our ability to solve this? Some of us are maybe in Fund Drive. Let's live our Fund Drive pitch. Yeah. Jen, I know you have some thoughts on this that are often a good way to kick this off.
Yeah, I thought I'd stop sharing screen to see everyone's faces as they think about this. One thing that I think is so incredible about public media is the business model and how that makes it different. You don't have to be the most salacious and try and get the most clicks on your website in order to stay alive. Public media is supposed to be serving people's information needs, and you know that you are if people call up and give you money when they don't have to, because a radio doesn't have a quarter slot that you have to plug in order to listen. So the fact that your business model, the public media business model, is about being relevant and serving people's needs, I think is something that should not be discounted as being a really valuable thing in this really polarized landscape. But I'd love to hear others. Yeah, Annie wrote too, no paywalls equals greater access for the community.
There's a bunch of that echoed. Our audience is our biggest funder, no paywalls. I think that that's such a huge freedom that we have as public media. Greg.
Yeah, I would argue though that while this is true, we're not as unique as we think we are anymore. I mean, there's so many. Yes, newspapers have gone down, have closed, but there are so many really great independent sites. The Nonprofit News Association. I mean, judging their work is there's some amazing work out there, and they're asking for funding just like we are from the public. And of course, audio is everywhere now. So I just think we need to be careful. We're not as unique as we think we are.
Yeah, that's a great point and good to keep in mind and think about as we're thinking about who we work with in the future and how we can raise all ships wisely.
Hi, so yeah, in Alaska, I'm with Alaska Public Media based in Anchorage, and one of the it's more of a unique advantage that we have in that I was describing it with in my group with the woman from Utah whose name I can't remember off the top of my head because there's 60 people here, but we sort of connect all of the public radio stations in the state, and we produce statewide news from Anchorage. We do local news coverage, but a large part of our strength is that we get reporters who live in these communities that are hundreds of miles apart. You can't access them by roads. And we were talking a lot about collaboration across even across sort of news rooms. So like we partnered with the local newspaper to do candidate questions. We partner with the local NBC affiliate to do a statewide debates. And so I think that we're in a position where we can sort of collaborate more easily. And I think that that's kind of what it's the advantage that we bring in our local news market.
For sure. Anybody else want to? Oh, there's a great point. A lot of news deserts that public media is the only outlet left. That is definitely a thing.
Last woman standing.
Yeah. Anybody else have a thought they want to chime in? There's some great thoughts in the chat rolling into.
I had a thought.
Yes.
I'm Sally Isley at the Public Radio in Rhode Island. We are a little station and fairly new, only about 15 years old. But I've worked in big stations and small stations. And I think that at this moment in time, public media has an opportunity to really think about itself, sort of almost get rid of the word news, I mean, we have to make choices about what we cover and who we are and how journalism is evolving for us, which it has been for, since the beginning of American journalism. And there's a lot of, this is sort of a moment where we have to ask ourselves, how do we regain our relevance by not trying to be all things to all people and really focusing in on the journalism. And I said the journalism, which speaks to, maybe a whole new model of storytelling and reporting, particularly as it relates to elections. So in some ways, it's about being brave enough to just say, no, we're not going to keep trying to do all of these things. We're going to decide what's relevant, what really serves our audience.
Yeah. That is so good. Does anybody have any last thoughts before we pass it back to Jen here?
Yeah, I just it's so hard to know who is our audience. We have our traditional audience. We have probably people we should be serving better, and I think we're in that place where we're trying to shift who that is, and I think that part is really hard to then focus our stories on that when maybe we're still trying to acquire a different set of people. So
yeah, I think that touches really clearly on the types of needs that this whole group shares, and that we're hopefully going to be able to address through this, and help build the skills for you to be able to navigate that better. So
yeah, I was going to say, you're in the right place. This is exactly what we're going to be talking about and diving into. Yeah. And I wanted to lift up one more comment, which is interesting in the chat, that Jordan Wilkie said, at least in North Carolina, public media seems to have better staff retention than other news outlets. And that really helps when you're trying to build projects and collaborations, especially over time. So it may not be true in your newsroom, but I think public media writ large does have people who stick around for a long period of time to do their work. All right. Well, I have a big reveal for you.
Bring it.
Yeah. All right. Which is, this is meant to be like no pressure, but like you are the heroes we've been waiting for. Like all of you, truly, like public media. Honestly, I don't know any other media type or media system that is better positioned to serve the American public than public media is in 2024. Not just for all the reasons that you shared, but like pound for pound public media, if you took all the reporters around the world, around the country, you are the biggest news outlet in America. Like you have more reporters, more producers, more editors than any other outlet if you combine your powers and you work together. So we are really excited to be supporting you. Also, hat tip to WNYC for this great Halloween costume GIF on the right. Okay, so All right, now we're tasking you with engagement, but you might be wondering, what does that word mean? I've heard it thrown around in my newsroom a million times, and it seems like it has a different vague hand-wavy, meaning every different person who says it. So we're gonna collaborate here on figuring out what it's gonna mean in terms of this program. There are so many names for this kind of journalism that we're gonna be helping you do and talk about. There's service journalism, engaged journalism, community engagement journalism, public-powered, people-powered, participatory, citizen-centered, etc. But just know all of these, even if there are subtle differences, they're all singing from the same hymnal. These are all approaches that say, start with the people you're hoping to serve, listen to them, bring them into the process, and make sure you're actually providing them what they're looking for writ large. So how to define engagement and how to make it into a pithy little thing you can stick on your cubicle wall, that is something that is outside of the scope of this program. But there are lots of different ways and people who have done great definitions of engagement that you might find inspiring. If your newsroom talks about engagement in a number of different ways, we encourage you to nail down some working definition of engagement so you know you're talking about the same thing. In this deck, which you will get later, we'll share a link out that has 4 different definitions from newsrooms that are deep in engagement, like WBEZ and LAist, you might know formerly as KPCC. They've been in our program and they've been challenged to define engagement for themselves, and even their own definitions of it are slightly different. So just know there's like no single way to do it. It's that spirit of starting with the public and trying to serve them through what you do versus starting with your assumptions as to what they need or want to know. That's kind of the through line here. And America Amplified, for this purposes of this program, defines engagement as journalists cultivating relationships with communities to discover, understand, and elevate community needs, aspirations, and stories. And in that elevation, you're actually creating journalism. You're answering questions. You are helping to get those information needs met. So in case you were hoping we were going to deliver like the single agreed upon definition of engagement by all of journalism, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but the great news is you get to play. You get to define it yourself. It's going to look slightly different in every newsroom, depending on the leadership, the context, the type of story you're doing. We just want to keep that at the fore, that you're starting with the people you're looking to serve versus they get it after you've made all the decisions, that they are just here to receive your content and consume it and not participate in it. That's not the kind of engagement we mean here. One way to think about it too is we have this nice little litmus test that if there's no pathway for the input from your audience to shape the decisions you're making in coverage, then it's not authentic engagement. So you might hear someone say, oh, we got so much engagement on the story because there were a bunch of comments. But if no one in the newsroom is actually reading those comments and they're not shaping your decisions, then it's just like one-sided. It's just, it's just a tree falling in the forest and it's not making a difference. If a story goes viral and just does very well, numbers wise, and you're like, we got great engagement, that's just consumption. People consumed it, but if you're not making decisions based on that story going viral or responding to what you learned from it, then it's just consumption. So again, it's that positive feedback loop. We have at Harken, we use the word engagement like it's used outside of journalism jargon, like an engagement ring. So when you think about engagement, when you're talking with friends who are not journalists, you're probably talking about people getting married. You're talking about people entering into a mutually beneficial relationship in which they are promising to support one another. And so we have 4 parts of the engagement ring that we teach. There's lots of different ways to look at it, but this is a simplified version. You start with the newsroom inviting some sort of input from the public. And with that invitation is a promise that you're going to listen. The public will then provide input. And if you stop there, if you're just collecting input, but you're not doing anything with it, we call that being an asshole. And you do not want to be an asshole. You want to actually close that loop and be mutually responsive. You want to listen to that input and create something with it, whether that's content or an event or a series or a newsletter, whatever it is, whatever your newsroom produces, you want to make sure that that feedback actually matters to you. And you got to follow up. And you have to include, acknowledge, and thank the people who participated, because they might have given you something and never known that it made a difference unless you tell them, because maybe they're not tuned into the radio at that moment. They're not on social media where you posted it. It's up to you to be responsive and say, you mattered, and what you told us actually made it into our journalism. This is a really important definition that is going to become more and more clear as we go through all these trainings coming up, that audience engagement and community engagement are not the same thing. The actions might be similar or the same, but the way that you're framing it and you're doing it is different. So there's a great piece that Ariel Zarolnik, who's at LAS now, wrote back in the Nieman Lab for 2022. She talked about audience engagement really being focused on who already knows you, who's tuning in, who's going to your website, who are your people who have already identified you as being valuable to them. Audience engagement can look like building habit with them, analyzing what people are doing, having focus groups, listening to the people who are already part of your party. Community engagement, on the other hand, is going to the people who don't know you or who don't want to have anything to do with you, potentially because they have not had a good experience, or they've been miscovered, or their communities have been harmed by journalists in the past. This is about going outside of the people who know you, listening to their needs, centering coverage on their needs, and it often results in community partnerships, working outside of the typical folks that you work with in order to reach a community that you haven't typically served or that doesn't really know about you or find you valuable. So audience engagement, another way of putting this, is that you can have the same prompt, like what questions do you have about or for candidates for governor? But it's audience engagement if you're only trying to get input from people who know you, like from your house, your website, your social, your partners, etc. But it's community engagement if you are actually going out to where people who don't know about you are and getting their input as well. So we hope that's clear. We're gonna, hammer that point home in many different ways. For America Amplified, we're gonna try to challenge you to do both. Not just listen to the people who already know you, because you should do that. They're there, they have ideas, they have questions, you should try and serve them well, but to also stretch and to go outside of the people you typically serve. So this is a great GIF that Chelsea shared with us, which is, this is a question that journalists sometimes face. Are we going to do audience or community engagement? But the good news is you don't have to. I like that little, two button push there. This is what this program is going to be about, is doing both of those things and learning from each of them, because they're each going to be slightly different. So we want to hear from you. We have lots of opinions. We have lots of data about why engaging better and more deeply with the public, be that your audiences or communities, is helpful for them and for your newsroom. But we want you to think about it and tell us how you think it's helpful, because you probably are going to think of things we don't know yet. So we're going to do another Jamboard. This time it's going to be a different link. And if my colleagues can put it in the chat, that would be terrific. You are going to go into that Jamboard right now. Oops, sorry, let me go back. And you are going to answer this first question on page 1. How might engaging better and more deeply be helpful for the public, like your audiences or community? And then you'll go to the next prompt on the next page, which is about how might it be helpful for your newsroom? So any questions there before you whisk away into your Jamboard to actually, plug some of those ideas in? No? Okay. All right. So you can start plugging those in, and then you're going to do another chat roulette and meet some folks that you haven't met before. We're going to break you into breakout rooms, and you'll have a few minutes to talk about it, but take time and put in as many sticky notes as you can, and we'll tell you when it's time to come back. So I'll go off screen share mode right now and hope that you are in here. Okay, great. People are already doing it. The anonymous liger. All right. So we'll let you whisk away into breakout rooms, and we'll see you shortly.
Welcome back, everyone. Seems like y'all are having great discussions in your breakouts. There were, once again, some really obvious trends that started to pop up. One of my favorites was inspiring civic engagement. Definitely seeing trust building on both sides, both the community side and the newsroom side, as a benefit. We see source diversity, we see getting listeners out of their bubbles, empowering communities, and focusing our coverage. That's always a good newsroom benefit. So there is obviously some good reasons to do this. And Jen, I think you have even more data-driven good reasons to do this as well.
Absolutely. I love what everybody was able to contribute here. And I wanted to give you some more cold, hard proof. As journalists, you know, you might just feel in your heart that engagement is worthwhile for the public and for your newsroom, but I also want to equip you with some facts. So in case you need to help cajole other colleagues to get on your side, you have those. First and foremost, people want to engage with you. This is not something you're forcing on them. There was this great AJP report that came out recently. They talked to 5,000 people about what they want from local news. And people want local news. You have a product that they want. They also want to see themselves in the news and in the newsroom. They want to be engaged. They want journalists to ask their questions. And they want you to meet them where they are. They want you to come out to their communities and not just be at your desk. And they want you to play a role in convening and connecting their communities as well. So these are some of the top themes. Again, if you're interested in more, we'll share the link out in the deck afterwards. But in short, people really, really want to engage with you, as much as you might hear in the press that like, oh, the media, the enemy of the people. That's not what most people think. They really want to be heard and represented by newsrooms. Also, engagement journalism is really good for business. We have known for a long time that when you engage with the public, and I saw some of the stickies on there saying as much, your stories are more original. They're different. You're breaking outside of your general, calcified editorial, lenses to look at like, what is newsworthy? What should we cover? And you're opening it up to things that you might not have thought about before. So your stories are usually not anything that anyone else in town is covering if you have competitors, be it in, broadcast or other formats. It's also relevant. These stories are coming from people's direct needs. And so you know that what you're doing is useful before you even start to report. And these stories tend to actually be a lot more popular in terms of shares and getting out in the world. So that's another bonus. And we jokingly call this the kind of holy grail story that is original, relevant, and popular. They're hard to hit. When the public is engaged, they're much more likely to be hit. I also want to share, hot off the presses from July, that's hot for me. We got proof from the Center for Media and Engagement at UT Austin, which is, if you know them, they're like the gold standard in studies and about journalism. They offer the first causal evidence that engaged journalism can impact newsrooms' bottom lines and improve relationships with the communities they serve. So it's not that, maybe engagement matters to our membership numbers. Maybe it helps us financially. They say it does. It causes more people to give you money and people to feel more connected to the newsroom. So if you need that study, I have it in various formats. If you need to share that with your colleagues who are like, we can't afford to do it. You might not be able to afford not to do it, really. The other thing is like funnel wise. If you're someone in your job who has never heard of a funnel, God bless you. But many of you might, and you might be responsible for making sure you get more people into your funnel, so to speak, to become members, to convert to some level of subscribing to your newsletters or getting closer to your business. And what we found is that engaged journalism helps in all different aspects of the funnel. And there's lots of different ways to create funnels, but these are kind of the major four. I won't read all of these out, but you get the idea. The other thing is it increases trust. Another academic study from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, we have done this kind of approach with newsrooms where they're doing engagement around elections. And in 2020, just surveys back from the people we worked with said it built trust with their community members, helped them be able to listen and respond better. It increased their audiences, and that importantly, they'll use these same skills and muscles built outside of the election cycle in other coverage. It might be accountability coverage after people are elected in an office. It might be education or any other type of coverage that you're doing on a regular basis. So the bottom line is, the more your audience feels included, engaged,
we are overjoyed to have.
Oops, the more that they see, I'm overjoyed too. The more that they see and hear proof that you're serving them, the more likely they are to trust you, consume your work, share your work, attend your events, and pay you. So again, it's not just good for the mission, although it totally meets the mission of public media. It is really good for your bottom line as well and your financial sustainability, not only from direct membership support, but we know a lot of foundations and funders and people who give like to see that happening too. Okay, so we have now achieved a moment in which you've earned yourself a stretch break. I'm going to play this timer here. When it counts down from 5 minutes to 0, that means we're all going to come back here, but take a moment, get a drink, go to the bathroom, do your thing, check your email, and we'll see you back real soon. seconds left. Are people back yet? Oh,
Hello.
Hopefully
I'm on back. It's always the harder part.
No, right? Yeah, hopefully you're back. If not, oh, I'm not doing that again. Sorry. There we go. As much as we want to just watch fish and hear that funky music. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are going to make it worth your while for the next, let's see, 42 minutes to keep your butts in chairs and keep this action going. We're going to share with you a buffet of engaged elections approaches. But before we do that, I just wanted to share out a caveat that we're going to focus on question and answer approaches. There are so many different ways to engage your audience. You could ask them, or communities, what do you think about our coverage? What do you want to see more of, etc. Those are great. Those aren't as actionable as questions. And so we are going to really focus on questions as the coin of the realm. And we know that powerful stories start with powerful questions. And questions are amazing because they attract people who are humble enough to say, I don't know something. If you ever had a comment section on your website, you know that that's not typically who hangs out there. People who are asking productive questions. They're usually asserting something or arguing. So questions are really great for attracting productive engagement. They also open up people to new ideas. If someone sees a headline with a question instead of an assertion, they are more likely, we are wired as humans to want to solve a mystery or to want to learn more. So in an age where we are dealing with a lot of polarization and people just being sure and yelling at each other on either side, questions can be a really great disarming way to open up a conversation and to make things more nuanced. They also are a way of not centering a story necessarily on conflict. They can be about a quest, a hero's journey of trying to figure something out and not necessarily be about right versus left or some sort of false binary. And then the other reason they're so great is that they can attract all kinds of people to engage. They're really accessible, and the atomic unit of journalism, like every story from what's the weather going to be tomorrow to who won the game, it's a question really in disguise. And what we find is that the young to the old can participate when you're just asking people for their questions and not asking them to pitch a story or to have a news tip that nobody else knows about. So it's just a really accessible way for people to participate. And questions are typically immediately actionable. So you can take that and turn it into assignment. It'll be a direct service to the people that you're trying to reach and support. Like we showed in the study, it's going to improve the relationship with those folks if you're of direct service, and it'll inspire more people to pay you. If you're deciding, once you figure out your project for America Amplified, you're like, we don't want to do questions, just talk to your coach. You might have a great reason, but we're going to strongly suggest you stick with a Q&A format for the kind of engagement with your audience and with the communities you serve. All right, so I'm going to throw it over to Chelsea to share with you the different levels of engagement.
Thank you. So we have established why there's great reasons to do engagement and in the Q&A format. But let's talk about what that actually could look like in the America Amplified context and in the context of elections. We will use some examples from the midterm project last year. And as we know, we have a ton of different types of stations in public media. No two stations are alike. And that is true in every station's capacity and needs and what that community needs. So we have sort of laid out different types of engagement that you can execute no matter what your capacity is, no matter what your community needs. And as I'm going through these, think about what excites you in these types of engagement, what questions you have, and we're going to have another open floor discussion afterwards. So to break it down, we think about engagement as happening on a foundational level, on an expanded level, and full scale. On the foundational level, that's really where that audience engagement is happening. The outreach that you do on your website or your social platforms or your radio promos, those places that your audience is hanging out. For the midterm election projects, most stations did this one. Can we jump to that next slide? So most stations, every station really did something in the foundational engagement level. They posted the Harken embed on their own website. They built a landing page, it's on the right rail. They posted out on their own social media. I think there's a social media example on their next slide too. And they made sure that those social media posts that they were using were closing that feedback loop with explainers based on the questions that they were receiving in. And that still fell into that foundational, that audience engagement level. We then step it up to the expanded engagement level. And that's where you build upon that foundation that you've laid and dip your toes into community engagement, engaging people who aren't part of your core audience. That could look like a digital partnership where you're sharing content with a organization that does reach an audience that you're hoping to connect more deeply with. That could be your tabling at a farmer's market or a community event. That's when you might even start doing some of that deep listening outside of your core audience. Some stations, I think actually back on that last slide, like WFYI and KUNC did these classroom visits where they went and talked to students who are new voters, to community college students, and just answered their questions about voting. NHPR did some Vox Pop stories in a new community. So that's when you start to step it into that next step, that expanded realm. And then on the full scale level, this is when you're really learning what those communities need. You've laid the foundation, you've started to build trust in a new community as you expanded your engagement. Now you're telling stories that really reflect that community. You're not parachuting in. You're addressing their information needs and getting regular feedback from the community. And you probably are working with some community partners to make this all happen. I want to showcase one particular station from last year and what they did throughout the election cycle. In the lead up to the midterms, they hosted an event with an organization called Braver Angels, which facilitates community discussions about the political division in our country. They hosted that at a brewery and they got 75 people from all different backgrounds and political ideologies to join. It was definitely not the usual suspects who came to that event. And they got some great feedback about how that conversation actually transpired. They are really bold in centering transparency in all of their coverage, especially their political coverage. I think on the next slide, we have some of how their website's set up to showcase all of that transparency and how that work manifests. They write up everything about why they do what they do. And in return for all of that transparency and that effort, that extra push that they're doing, they are getting feedback regularly. And then they also got a really high volume, just directly related to the midterm project. They got a really high volume of questions that came in that were really relevant and that we were able to answer for them. So it paid back in dividends and continues to pay back in dividends. And Scott Blanchard is the director of journalism at WITF, and he is here on the call. If he's in a setting that he might be able to speak in and fill in some of the gaps that I might have missed, that would be awesome while folks think of questions. But also, Scott, if you're not on the spot, that would be okay.
I think you did a good job, and thank you for what we did. Appreciate that. But I mean, I think the thing I was thinking while you were talking is that we've done a lot of events since that event in Chambersburg that have contributed to the citizens' agenda that we're trying to create to guide our election coverage in 24. But just specific to that Chambersburg event, there are questions that came up at that event that are still, like, we're still bringing those into our coverage. And we had a meeting the other day where we were talking about things that we're going to do between now and this election in November, and then things are going to carry into next year. And some of the things that we heard in Chambersburg are still rising to the top as things that will guide us in certain stories we'll do, or questions we'll answer, or different, like approaches that we'll take to stories. So we're really trying to work with these engagement efforts to bring them with us and move them forward, and not make them, oh, we just did an event in this town and now we're done with that. Trying to make it live on and evolve.
We don't want to be assholes.
That's our news director, Randy Parker. So yes, yes, he just summarized in 5 words what it took me 5 minutes to say. So.
Great. Yeah. Any questions that y'all have for the America Amplified team about how we think about engagement in this practices, or how any of our stations have put this into practice? You can raise your hand or drop them in the chat.
I wouldn't mind asking a question if no one has one yet. Scott, I've had the opportunity to work with you and your colleagues in a few different moments on this engaged elections work. And WITF is a newsroom we point to a lot for the great work that you're doing. And it seems like everyone is on the same page about what your mission is and how you are going to go about your mission. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the internal either like meetings or coming together or politics that it took to kind of get everyone to be on the same page? Or are you all just magically aligned in your thinking?
It's all JMR's fault.
I'll take it.
On a serious note, she did work with us specifically for a stretch of time, which with the whole staff, which really helped. Helped embed this. But just, I think what we've tried to do is from the beginning, not look at engagement as like a specialized thing or a thing that one corner of the newsroom does and others don't, but rather how can we bring engagement into every beat that we have and every effort that we do. And so we just keep talking about it and planning to do events and different kinds of engagement. And we have a bunch of different ways that we're engaging, with audiences and with people and communities. So it's not just one thing. So I don't know, I guess that's what I would say. And Randy might have some thoughts too, but it's just an effort to make it part of the culture here and not make it, oh, that's something that person over there is doing and I don't need to worry about. It's like everybody contributes in some way.
With anything that you're doing to try to develop the culture of your newsroom, it's exhausting how you have to keep going back and repeating it again and again and again. You have to find friendly ways to bring it into the conversation. Journalists are usually not receptive to receiving culture point messaging more than once. They get really resistant after 2 or 3 times of the same thing. So it really just requires tenacity and maybe creativity, determination to just, we're going to keep talking about this. We're going to talk about it in our one-on-ones with the reporters. We're going to talk about it in our staff meetings. We have to talk about it with our leadership team again and again and again, because it's just easy for it to get out of people's mindset. But you have to have the determination to keep messaging on it,
and then talk about it when it works.
Oh yeah.
When we have successes, or when we have good feedback, or when we have a revelation that somebody brought to our attention at an event or whatever, it's like, that's why we're doing this. That's the payoff.
Scott's really good at
that. We have a question in the chat from Annie Schreffler. And Annie, you and I talked about this a ton at ONA, which is when this feels abstract to newsroom staff and they don't feel they have the time for these thought experiments, how do you avoid or manage the just tell us what you want us to do question? And I'm gonna pitch that one to Elisa, because you've heard my perspective, Annie. Not all of you have, but you can in the future. But I'm gonna let Elisa do it.
Oh gosh, that just tell me what to do question. That's terrible. I was actually going to pitch in and address what the folks at WITF were saying and probably dodge that question altogether, Chelsea, which is to say, they are talking about a change in newsroom culture that has taken place over the last maybe 5 years, because they've been a part of America Amplified for quite some time. And I'm not saying that we take all the, we didn't do it all for WITF, but a change in culture in your newsroom is something we're going to be looking for over the course of this year. It's not going to happen everywhere, and it's not going to happen as deeply as it has at WITF, I think, but we want to see how people are thinking differently about engagement as a strategy and as part of your workflow and as part of how you approach coverage. Just tell me what to do is not a very productive question to ask me. I will just say that. Chelsea, what is your response to that? I would like to hear that.
Tossing it right back to me. So I think that what you're getting at there, Annie, was the staff that's just saying, I just tell me how I need to do it. Don't make me, I don't want to get into all this theory. You don't need to make me buy into this. I'll just do what you want. And I think that is in part just how some people are in their work, and that really comes to a management question, which is a whole different training and webinar. But I think that there is a lot to be said for taking this tiered approach, starting with foundational stuff and laying the groundwork and just giving people bite-sized chunks to start with, and then expanding it. And then eventually you get to do that big full-scale stuff. WITF didn't start at, this whole system that they have in place now. There was growth. So I think that patience and flexibility, as we have been talking about, is a huge thing. And then we also have to look really critically at what we do and what we do that doesn't serve us and what we need to stop doing. And we will be posing that question to you a lot throughout this whole thing, and we'll give you exercises to do to really actually come up with something that you aren't going to continue doing that isn't serving you or your audience. Like, that is a real question, not a thought exercise. You have to stop doing something. Chances are you've been doing something and holding on to something that isn't serving you or your audience. So that is where we make up time sometimes, is stopping doing things that weren't helping us. So
I do think that there's also a reality that actually America Amplified did a great job in your primer on how to do engagement. There is a certain reality for stations when they really want to invest in engagement, and that is staffing for it. And so it's really thinking about, what does it take? Reporters cannot just drive this without the training. Maybe it takes an engagement producer. Maybe it takes somebody, somebody has to be managing the relationships that you're aggressively going out to try and develop. There are whole new categories of jobs now that exist around engagement journalism that I think we have to recognize. And so it is a challenge, and I don't have answers, especially on a smaller scale, except going back to the question of, sometimes it means really letting other things go to focus on what you feel is really a priority in your coverage. And that's inadequate. That is an inadequate answer, but
yeah. There's a lot happening in the chat that I haven't been able to keep up with. Is somebody who's been over there able to surface anything? Or
yeah, I can surface. One of the things is kind of thinking about that formula for change again on an individual level, and to try and understand the people who you're trying to get on board, persuade to do this work, is understanding what are they dissatisfied with and how can engagement help solve that problem for them. Or what do they aspire to do, and how can engagement help them do more of the thing that they get rewarded for or feel rewarded for personally? So that's sometimes a way of just framing the argument around what that person or that role is specifically, and not just, it's good for you, believe me. And Jessica, you did that, right, with WITF?
Yeah, exactly. And I put some more about that in the chat. I'll also call out that Brittany mentioned from WFYI, the idea that a lot of journalists are doing community engagement in different ways. They don't necessarily see or label it as such. So, as we can kind of work together to lift up and point out what they're already doing and doing well, that is community engagement, and what more they would like to do or how they need to do it better for themselves. It's motivating. That's also something that Brittany's bringing up.
Beautiful. Jen, do you want to take it into how this aligns with our missions and how questions fuel that?
Absolutely. So I'm going to share the deck again, and we're going to go through just a few different ways real quick about how this might look. This kind of engagement, the foundational, the expanded, and the full scale, just how that can manifest in this project with America Amplified. And then we're going to talk about your mission, which WITF has also done a great job being very transparent and clear about why they do what they do. All right, so one of the things that you'll be able to do through America Amplified is to ask people early on in the election cycle what they want to ask candidates as they compete for votes. And essentially this might sound like, oh, all right, that's simple. It's actually really profound because it completely shifts the power dynamics from reporters sharing what candidates want voters to hear through press conferences or press releases or saying something salacious and making the news, to instead voters getting reporters to ask the candidates questions about what voters or residents want to hear. Sometimes this is called the citizens agenda model. You might have seen it before. Jay Rosen is a huge proponent of it. He's a media critic who's been talking about doing this forever. And we're happy and excited to see more newsrooms doing this approach. And by collecting people's questions, not just who are in your audience, but also in communities that you want to serve, you can start to surface to the candidates what the real issues are that people care about. Right now, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors going up in politics around issues that are not really issues, but some political people are using to try and get folks riled up, but aren't the top things that people are talking about at the dinner table or that matter to their lives. This is a way for you to start to do what you can as a newsroom to shift the attention to what people actually care about and what they're interested in knowing before they vote. And this can result in all sorts of different products like candidate questionnaires, voter guides, interviews, etc. Another approach, and this is really good to do right before an election happens and before early voting starts or ballots are mailed, if you're in a state that does early voting and mail-in ballots, is to ask people get all the voting questions from people. Ask them, what questions do you have about voting? This can be anything from, voter ID laws, which seems to change all the time depending on where you live, to, what do I do if my kid drew on my ballot and can I still send it in even if it's got crayons all over it? Like there's questions big to small that people want to know as they prepare to vote. And this can result in all sorts of things, from deep dives to explainers to FAQs to being part of your voter guides, even printed guides that you can hand out, events, etc. So this is another way that you can engage with your audiences and communities to make sure they understand, what do I need to do to qualify to vote, and how do I actually do it? Not just who do I want to vote for, but like, how do I do it? Because in many states, it's become very hard to do. And then another thing you can think about post-election, and they did this in 2022 with the midterms, a lot of the newsrooms, is to get questions about the aftermath. So what questions do you have about how the election went? One thing I wanted to point out here too is that these embeds that you are going to be able to use can be formatted in any language. So there's a Spanish version on the right. If you have audience members that you're serving who speak other languages, you can also program these to be in other languages as well. So those are just some examples of how you can use questions to then create coverage that is of direct service to people. All right, now we're going to get into next steps in this program. And this is, I cannot stress this enough. This work is so worthwhile to do. It might seem, because of the beats of your days, where if you're someone who's kind of like minute to minute needing to perform and get things in for deadline, this might be like, oh, what a glorious luxury to step back and think about the mission of what we're doing and why. But please take the time to do this, whether that's carving out a lunch and learn with some colleagues and making it fun, ordering some food, getting some sticky notes up. It's going to be so useful and pay dividends down the road for you to think about your mission for politics and election coverage. I am inspired so much by a partner that we work with all the time at Hearken. They're called Trusting News. They're an incredible organization that helps people, helps newsrooms talk more about what they do and why to increase trust with the public. And so you'll see a different format with these slides. These are Trusting News slides that they've given permission to share here. So they think about the mission statement as really drawing from your newsroom's mission statement. So thinking about what do you want to do as it relates to politics coverage or elections coverage, and how does that relate to your newsroom's mission? So hopefully all of your newsrooms have an easy to find mission statement on your websites, and you can look at that and make sure that your coverage is aligned. But then after you create your mission statement, your activities are going to flow from there. You might decide in your mission that it is to help inform the people that you're trying to serve, and do it in a way that is really tactical and useful. And you might then eliminate horse race coverage, for instance, because it doesn't align with your mission for how you want to serve the public. You'll think about what you'll stop doing, as Chelsea mentioned, to support that mission, and then later how you'll measure success. So Trusting News has lots of amazing data about how your newsroom can help earn trust by telling the story of your journalism. You might have been around long enough to hear someone say, "No one cares how the sausage gets made." Not true. People do care, and when they don't know how the sausage gets made, they will fill in the blanks, and they often will not be what is true. This matters of telling the story of what you are doing, because as you know, not all journalism is good. It is rational and wise for people to be skeptical of the media, especially as pink slime outlets start to pop up, or outlets that are already captured by special interests or commercial interests or other political parties. You need to tell people that what you do and why. And public media, really, like, this should be some great cut and pasting from the Public Media Broadcast Act, from your newsroom's mission. You have this on hand. You just need to expose it and show people what you're doing and why. So you need to just differentiate your own work and show what makes it trustworthy. This is an academic study we're happy to link to as well. It found that Americans of all political persuasions agree that news media is fundamentally untrustworthy, even as they tend to tune into the same channels and spend similar amounts of time engaging with the news. People's distrust is growing. It's like perceived, depending on political persuasion, sometimes as a badge of honor, of just saying, I'm always skeptical, or you never know what these people think. This is something that is that you have to contend with in this current context. If you've been seeing like the different polls or the Pew studies that come out, trust in media continues to go down, even though consumption remains relatively the same. So you have some control over this. If readers don't know something about you, they are not going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Their assumptions will not necessarily be flattering ones. So do them a favor and connect the dots for them, so they don't have to wonder or say, well, they must have chosen to not cover this candidate for this reason. Tell them which candidates you're going to cover and why, or how you're going to go about your elections coverage, so that they don't have to call in and leave an angry voicemail or an angry email. Let them know why you're making the decisions. And so what you'll do in a mission statement is really tell your own story. It can be brief, it can be many paragraphs long. It's really up to you. But you should tell the story of why people should invest in you, as in why they should consume your content and believe you, why they should feel a connection to you, and why they should trust your team. Because if you're not the ones to tell them, who else will? So you need to be the ones to share your own story with people. You might be uncomfortable with this, of like, my job is to talk about others and not ourselves. This is so worth it, to tell people why you do what you do, because there's a lot of process and a lot of things that you do differently than other media, in terms of the rigor that you use and the way that you make decisions, that people don't know about, and they will appreciate knowing, or at least having access to know more, if they question why you're doing what you're doing. So mission statements can take a lot of different forms. They can be, for instance, this is from LAist, it says SCPR, but I'm sure they've changed their email addresses for now. But they actually had mission statements for all their reporters. So Mary Plummer covers politics, And she gives a bit of a mission statement about why she's doing what she's doing. She writes, democracy can be messy. In Southern California, the political system is changing in front of us, from how we vote to who is running for office. Many voices are shouting to be heard. I examine who gets listened to and why, and provide a guide to anyone who wants to more fully participate in civic life. Mwah! What a beautiful thing to be able to say as a reporter, here is what I do.
Yeah.
Don't do all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you can even think about which of your reporters are doing political reporting and how they can share what they're doing and thinking. All right. And then other things you can do too is use it for your fund drives. Use it to have more members. When you have your next fund drive, you can talk about like why what you do is important to democracy and how your politics coverage and elections coverage keeps people accountable. I know a lot of people just had their fall pledge drive, but there's going to be another one. It's going to be a spring one. There's going to be a fall one. There'll be an end of year one. But think about telling that story in when you're making a call to action. So here are the elements of a good mission statement. They should include the why, so the reason you do what you do, the how, the way you conduct your work, and the what, the actual thing that you do. And this is from a presentation from 2020 that they're pulling from. So what they will do is these mission statements, once you publish them and put them out into the world, they're going to help hold your newsroom accountable, both internally and externally, by getting on the record. They're also going to show that you have values and ethics and goals, which again, if people don't see it written down or that they can't find it, they might be left to assume you don't have values, ethics, or goals. It'll also save you so much time in responding to comments or criticism from the community by saying, oh, you know, I can understand, here's why you're frustrated. This is actually what we're trying to do here. I hope that's useful to you. So it doesn't leave reporters to do this on their own and try and fight with someone or be defensive. You can send them a URL that has the reasoning behind what you're doing. And it helps you keep your coverage consistent and tied to goals. Again, it'll help you decide what you're not going to do and what you are going to do. It's going to help you focus. Beyond the mission statement, you can also think about FAQs. You know, what are other things you might be able to share with people that they might wonder? You could tell people about your priorities. These are the races we're going to be able to cover. We don't have enough staff to cover everything. So just so you know, you won't be hearing about this district or this race because we just don't have enough people. But go here to find out more. You also might want to share stories or situations that you're not going to cover. We will not carry X politician live on our airwaves because of X, Y, and Z. What the sources you're going to rely on for your information are, how you'll cover candidates, how you'll report on results, etc. So these can make up an FAQ that goes near your mission statement that gives people even more information. You'll get these slides. I know this will be pretty small on your screen, but we have lots of examples here, like from Colorado Public Radio, did a fabulous job in 2020 talking about their mission statement and also having an FAQ so that when they kept getting more questions in, they could add it to the FAQ as well. This is just a really good landing page to think about and make sure that it's visible and connected to on the stories that you do around elections and political coverage writ large. So this is your goal between now and the next session, which is going to be on the 26th. So we'll have you get it in the day before if you can. And Chelsea will share more about how shortly. But you'll want to draft a mission statement for your coverage of democracy, politics, and government, whichever one makes the most sense to you. Could be elections, etc., but just for the kind of work you're going to be doing coming up now and into 2024. And then to make a list of questions, you want to explain about the goals of your coverage and how you make decisions. So this can be both big picture and specific, and you can also give examples too of what you do. We want you to write for your community, not for other reporters. So do a jargon edit at the end and make sure all the words you're saying are clear and accessible. Anyone could understand it. You can also test it with people who aren't in the news and say, do you get what we're trying to say here? What questions do you have? You can stress test it before it goes live. So that is a bit about what you'll be doing next. And we're really excited to see, we've gotten to work with dozens of newsrooms over the years making mission statements, and it never fails to inspire to see people get on the record and talk about their values and why they do what they do, and to see just a huge variety of how people are expressing that. You will not regret putting a mission statement up. All right, so I'll throw it to Chelsea for the final housekeeping moments.
Thank you. So I'm going to throw the homework doc in the chat. If you do not grab it here, it will come in an email. We'll throw it in the general Slack if you're that editorial lead who is in our Slack channel. So that is right here. It's going to prompt you to make a copy. So that is your copy, edit it. We just encourage you to change the name so that your call letters are at the beginning. Otherwise, we just have a bunch of documents that say copy of session one homework. And we would get confused if you shared it with us. So that is where that document is. If you don't grab it right now, it will come to you in other ways. Do not fret. So we will be sending out, like I said, the homework, the deck, additional resources, all after this session via email. Look for that. And then we will also be sending you out information about your next steps with your coaches. We're hoping that we can have 2 coaching sessions with every station by the end of the year. If that doesn't fit into your timeline, that is okay, but we're trying to make that happen. And we can work through those homework items with you in your coaching sessions. We really encourage you to do that homework before the next session. We know that it's an ask to have you do all of this, and we really appreciate your dedication and your dedication to the 2 hours that we just asked of you, and for being so engaged and participating in this whole session. Our next session will be on 10/25. It is not next week. It is in a month. That is a change if you were paying deep attention to the dates that were coming through. Due to registration numbers and folks that maybe weren't able to attend this one, we wanted everybody to get the time to watch this back if they weren't here, to do that homework and to get folks on board with the whole idea before we get back into the next session. That one will be super hands-on. This one was a little more slide heavy. Next one is very much a workshop. Bring your thinking caps, your Post-it notes, your Sharpies, your favorite snack, and we will see you there. Does anybody have any questions? Did I forget to say anything from that?
Survey. We'd love them to fill out a survey.
Thank you. Will you? I didn't. Yeah, there's a survey after this.
Right.
That is super short.
Before you leave, yes.
Yes. Thank you. If you have any questions that you want to chime up with, we can answer those. If you have questions that you'd rather ask via email, we can answer those that way. But thank you, thank you, thank you.